Peace, family. It's your boy Fonzie Neutron representing for bat.online.com. Hope everybody has had a great week thus far. Leading into the weekend, wishing peace and positivity to everybody out there. Bat.online, we will be back soon with the website, just going through a few updates at the minute. So I appreciate everybody staying patient. Joined this week by a special guest by the name of Cape. So definitely excited to have this brother come on the platform. We're not just going to be speaking music, but he's going to be bearing witness to some of his testimony. So praise God for that. We're definitely appreciative to have this brother come and grace us with his time. So what's good with you, sir?
Yeah, I'm good, man. I'm glad to be on the platform, man. Thanks for having me.
I appreciate you making the time. Now, we've obviously connected before in the past in regards to like music and stuff. I know you've got like a musical background. Some of that is, safe to say probably on the back burner at the minute. But I want to sort of get into some of your story a little bit. So just tell us a bit about yourself to start off with.
So yeah, very involved in music. Started rapping in '98, late '98, when I was like 10 years old. From that point, just continued to do that. Up until about 2015, that was what I would now call secular, just like regular hip hop music. Then in 2015, my life took a big shift. Like I was actually trying to disprove the Bible to someone, which kind of led me on this investigation, which resulted in me becoming a Christian. So I did like a whole 180. From that point, the music, I did start to express my faith in the music. But yeah, so that's always been something that I like to express in the music. The fact that it was actually quite an evidence-based journey that led me to change my mind on all of that.
Okay, that's interesting. There's a few points right there. I want to say, just starting off with, where did you grow up? Was that in the UK? And what were some of your early music influences? I know you mentioned initially doing music you would consider secular, but which part of the UK did you grow up, if you grew up in the UK, and who were some of your influences?
Yeah, so I grew up in the UK, grew up in Birmingham. The very first hip-hop album that I had was a Run DMC album. That got me, listening. In fact, I can remember even earlier than that. Like, I can remember, being a young kid, like, not even double digits, like, listening to Gangsta's Paradise and, the Out Here Brothers and stuff like that, when it would just be, like, on the radio and TV. But, yeah, in about 98, they dropped this Run DMC Greatest Hits, and then that's when I completely, got wrapped up in hip-hop. But it wasn't until I started listening to more Tupac that I started to take it kind of super seriously. I could see that you could really express yourself with it. And then Tupac basically became my number one influence from that point. I listened to every rapper that was out, but yeah, no one's music really reached me in the way that Tupac's did. So I would always say he was my main musical influence.
Yeah, I'd say, definitely myself too. A lot of us with Tupac, especially from a certain epoch or time period, and even carrying forward, I mean, he definitely did a great work, and just in terms of, as you said, just expressing himself in a way that was able to reach a multitude of people, and for people to realize, this music, it can have, well, especially when it comes to this rap music, it can have a soulful aspect and stuff also, because a lot of the times people were just focused on the lyricism, not to negate, Tupac's lyricism or anything like that, but he definitely brought in a soulful aspect and a wider range of expression. But you made another point that I wanted to just ask you about. You said you was at a point where you was trying to disprove the Bible. Now, can you kind of bring us to there? Where did that come from? What gave you that mindset at the time? Why was this something that you was trying to do?
So, I mean, at the time I had spiritual beliefs, but I would describe them more as kind of new age beliefs. Now, I was into going to clairvoyance and having people try to tell me my future, and I was getting into things like the law of attraction and trying to manifest things and this kind of stuff. And basically, I was at a point spiritually where I basically, without realizing it, I was making myself into a god, because anything that I felt was right, anything that I agreed with, I thought yeah, that's probably what God thinks. And if I didn't agree with something, I'd think, yeah, God doesn't agree with that. So really, instead of me taking on, like, being a reflection of God's image, I was actually trying to reflect myself onto God, if you get me. But I had someone very close to me that was seeking and was saying, you know, I'd like to read the Bible, I'd like to go to church. And I was saying, no, you don't want to do that. Because I had watched this so-called documentary called Zeitgeist, which was very popular at the time. You might have heard of it.
Yeah, I'm familiar with it. I watched it a few times.
Yeah. So, like, a big part of that is how they talk about Jesus never existed, and it's all stolen from older mythologies and older religions. So at this point, I'm believing that, like, it seemed like it was well researched. So I was coming from that aspect, like, now you don't want to go to church. Jesus never existed. I said, I'm going to prove it to you. And then from me saying I'm going to prove it, that's what opened up this kind of worms, really, because the first thing I did was look into the claims of that Jesus myth theory from that documentary. So I'm reading all of these mythologies, all of these older religions that are supposed to have the same story, and none of them was the same. Like, when you actually look into them individually and read them for yourself, they're actually very different. So I was like, oh, okay. Like, that kind of, it taught me a big lesson not to just take things on face value and just believe what people, you know, if something looks like it's clued up, like, it doesn't necessarily mean that it is. So, so from that point, I thought, well, did he really live as a man? So I started looking into, like, the historical evidence for Jesus. You know, I found out he did exist, and there's more historical evidence for him than there is for, like, Julius Caesar, for example. No one ever questions if he lived. Found out that his name wasn't Jesus, it was Yeshua. So what we have is, like, an English translation. And then that's kind of what started the journey from there, really. It kind of sort of spiraled at that point.
Okay, no, great. I mean, it's interesting you mentioned like Zeitgeist and that kind of vein of journalism and documentary. And as you said, you know, a lot of times people can just put something together and it could be well produced. We're seeing a lot of that, especially nowadays with where technology and media is at now, where ever inundated by people producing stuff and presenting it as like it's factual and people just watching it. I mean, you go on social media all the time and there's all sorts of, oh, this person said this or this person said that or this was like this or this was like that. And a lot of the times it's incorrect or it doesn't have the actual evidence and stuff there. So you say you did a lot of research and a lot of that you put into one of your songs as well. Do you want to break that down for us in terms of what research you did historically and the results that came about?
Yeah, so I mean, I'm really, like, fast tracking this because this was a period of weeks, even months. Like, it probably was like over a few months that I was doing this research. But like I say, I was looking into, like, the historical stuff and what, like, historians of that day had to say about him. So the thing that really kind of piqued my interest, because I'm thinking, well, maybe the guy was just like a wise man, or he was a good teacher, or that kind of thing. But I noticed that one of these historians from, like, the 1st century, they basically said that he was performing miracles by, like, kind of like witchcraft or something, which it shocked me to see someone from his day who wasn't a Christian, they didn't follow him, but rather than say that he wasn't performing miracles, which is what I would have expected to see, you know, he was affirming that there was miracles, but he was just basically trying to say, well, it's not God's power, it's some other power, it's some kind of witchcraft. So that kind of interested me. And to kind of fast forward, because I was doing all sorts of research at the time, but to fast forward, because I already had spiritual beliefs, I prayed at this point and I said, God, because I realized that the whole of Christianity hinges on the resurrection. It's historically, it's a historical fact that he died on the cross, but if he didn't rise again, then the whole Christian thing, like, it just, none of it matters and you can throw it out the window. So at this point I prayed and I said, God, if this Jesus is someone to you that I need to know about, I need you to show me if he rose from the dead. And then I prayed that prayer and I just forgot about it. And then that night, very same night, I saw a documentary on the burial cloth of Jesus that has this very, like, mysterious image on it that was like produced by the resurrection. It's known as the Shroud of Turin. So as soon as I seen it, I thought back to that prayer, and it kind of felt like a punch in the face almost. It was like, it really, like, kind of rocked me at the time. But even though in my spirit I felt like, yeah, this is the answer to my prayer, I still wanted to like do a lot of research into that artifact, and could this thing be forged, and what do we know about it? So I did like a lot of research into that, because I knew it's something I was going to want to share with people. And that's what the song is like. I felt like I was talking to people about it, and people would look like it was kind of snoozing, like it's not a topic that people really want to talk about. I'd never heard of it, until I seen it that day. So I thought, well, I have a gift for music. If I can communicate it in that way, then maybe I can make people like pay a bit more attention to it. So I edited a video using footage from like History Channel documentaries and BBC and all this kind of stuff, and then just put the song out, and that's how that went down. And it's been really useful in like people that would never like look at this kind of stuff or consider anything spiritual. It's like really shows them like a different angle of it. So it's been cool.
Yeah, it's a good. I was gonna say, what type of reception did you get doing it that way, that sort of way of, I guess, evangelizing through music?
Yeah, so the reception has been a very, very positive one, because I'm not saying to people like, hey, this is what I believe, you should believe it. I'm saying, look at this evidence and weigh up for yourself. Like I'm actually giving something like tangible, like that people can really look at and decide for themselves. And it's like, just do that investigation for yourself. I'm not really trying to push an agenda with it. I'm like, if someone comes to a different conclusion to me, then that's on them. You know what I'm saying? I'm not in the business of trying to force anyone's hand in it. So it's just one of them. Like I just like to present it to people, because I wasn't aware of it. So I feel like me becoming aware of it is what opened my eyes to it. So that's all I'm trying to do for other people, really.
Yeah, I think it's great the way, as you said, just presenting the evidence in a way where people can check it out for themselves, open their mind and their hearts, and we live in a time now where we see a lot of tumultuousness, turmoil, and things happening around the world. I just read the other day that in the Gaza, some of the Palestinians have allegedly said that they've, met Jesus or seen Jesus. People are having visions and all sorts of things. So I say that to say, in the times that we're in now, we do hear a lot of prophetic word and a lot of people from different, even religious groups, speaking on Jesus. Now, you said a good point where you said, I guess the axis of Christianity has the dependency on Jesus rising on the third day from the grave. But when we see other groups, like you have some messianic groups that do, even Jews that accept Jesus, but some of them may not accept the resurrection. You hear the Muslims who say Jesus was a Muslim because he prayed to the Father. They say, even though they say Allah couldn't be a father, but they say, Jesus is a Muslim because they say he submitted his will to God. I mean, what say you to, I guess, all these other groups that try and lay the claim to Jesus?
So a lot of people, first of all, you have non-religious people that take the idea that I had at one point, which was, well, maybe this guy is just like a good teacher and the story's been twisted over the years and he's become the son of God in like tales and stuff. So what I would say to those people first and foremost is Jesus is he was either crazy, he was either a liar, or he was either telling the truth. Those are the only three options that you've got. Most of our justice system these days is based off the teachings of Jesus. So I wouldn't call the guy a fool, because like we've built an entire society off his teachings. So that's kind of out the window. Like you can't say that he's crazy, because his teachings make so much sense. The fabric of our society is kind of built on them. Like if you think about BC and AD, like all of human history is divided by this guy's birth.
Mm-hmm.
His teachings are used every day to this day, so he's not crazy. The reason why I say this is because Jesus made certain claims. He said that he was the Son of God. He was the only way to God. It was only through his death, paying the price of everybody's sin, and his resurrection that we can be reconciled to God. So that's a big claim for anyone to make. Like these people that call themselves gurus and this and that, they don't make them kind of claims. Only Jesus made that claim. So this is why you have to decide, is he crazy? Is he a liar, or is he telling the truth? So the fact that his teachings are so wise and so widespread today, and all of human history is divided by his birth, and all of these factors, like, this makes me think, well, I don't consider him a liar, I don't consider him crazy. So that's when you have to consider, was he telling the truth? The religious groups, they tend to say, like, oh, he was a prophet, he's not God, he didn't claim to be God, he didn't claim to be the Son of God. There's actually quite a lot of points in the Bible where he does claim to be God. He said, before Moses was, I am, which I am is a reference to God. He's saying he was around before Moses, which was thousands of years before his time. Yeah. So he wasn't claiming to be a mortal man there. You had, I think it was Thomas, the guy, his disciple that doubted him. When he came back from the resurrection, Thomas had said, I won't believe that it's him until I put my finger in his wounds and, this kind of stuff. So Jesus presents himself to him and says, do that, basically. And when he does that, he calls him my God. Jesus doesn't correct him there, you know what I mean? Like, Jesus doesn't say, no, don't call me God, Say Muslims, for example, they'll say, they'll bring up where Jesus says, someone calls him good, and Jesus says, why do you call me good when only the Father is good?
God, yeah.
Yeah, so that's the misinterpretation. He's not saying that he's not good and only the Father's good. He's saying, do you recognize who I am? He's saying, are you just like flattering me? Are you just trying to big me up by calling me good? Or do you actually recognize that I am the embodiment of God standing in front of you? So it's just like people misinterpret certain things. So it's funny, right? One more point just to wrap this up. If you look at all these New Agers, yeah, and they talk about these enlightened ones and these gurus and all these higher energy people or whatever they describe them as, they always include Jesus in that, right? They always say, oh, he was a master, this, that, and the other. Like, they all have something to say about Jesus. But Jesus never credited anybody but himself. He never said anyone else was the way. So when all of these people are pointing here, there, and everywhere, and also to Jesus, just know that Jesus didn't point to any of them. That's what I'll say about that.
Yeah, no, that's an interesting point, and it is something that we do see a lot because even for those that are quite, I guess, astute or check into different things, Jesus is always mentioned, throughout history and in different groups and stuff as well. The interesting thing is, even in my own experience of what I've saw from just life and a lot of individuals, whether they particularly follow any kind of religion or anything, there's like a natural, I don't want to say belief, but a natural either understanding or even yearning of Jesus or his existence. Whether people choose to frame it that way or not, it's sort of like undeniable, whether, and I feel that's why even a lot of these other major religious groups or spiritual systems or even some of these New Age systems do find some kind of way to either include Jesus in it in some way. And I think that I've always found that to be quite interesting.
Yeah. I mean, why is there so much focus on Jesus if he's like insignificant? Like, something else I would say is, these days there's a lot more people that are waking up to the fact that in the media we're seeing certain agendas being pushed, and in a lot of, say, like music videos or movies, like you'll see a lot of like occult symbolism and a lot of like satanic things like cropping up here and there. A lot more people they're tapping into this, and they're becoming more clued up to the fact that there are certain negative messages that are constantly pushed and certain agendas that are constantly pushed. So for those people that are waking up to these kind of things, I want them to run a little test, right? When you're just watching TV or you're listening to music or music videos or movies or whatever it is, whatever media you're consuming, notice how much they mock Jesus, right? But they never mock anybody else. Like, no religion is ridiculed like Christianity is. In a day where if I wanted to identify as a lamppost, no one would be allowed to tell me I'm not. Like, in a day that's so super sensitive that you can't even tell someone that they're not who they are, but it's okay to cuss Jesus out. I mean, they even made his name, Jesus Christ, a cuss word. Like, you wouldn't say, oh, Muhammad, and that's a cuss word. Like, the Muslims would not stand for that. Nobody tries to do that. Nobody, you don't see on sitcoms the Buddhist character is a complete fool, but we've got Ned Flanders, you know, or any other Christian character. They're always portrayed as, you know, some kind of fool or some kind of seedy person that's got some, you know, hidden agenda. Like, if you look at music videos, for example, like there's so many like satanic videos.
Yeah, I think recently, sorry, not to cut you, we've just seen one that recently came out, I believe, from that they call him Nas X and
Lil Nas X, yeah, exactly.
And you know,
like,
he's mocking
he's mocking Jesus. The baby did it. He's on the cross in his video. That Lil Dicky did it in a live performance. He's coming out dressed like Jesus. You know, and these are just little examples from the top of my head. And the one that you just brought up, which somebody
said Jay-Z's just produced a new movie. I've got no interest in watching it, but
you know what? I'm glad you brought up Jay-Z, right? Because Jay-Z gave an interview one time, right? He had a hoodie on, and on his hoodie it said, "Do what thou wilt." Do what thou wilt is the only rule in the Satanic Bible, and it's a quote from a guy called Aleister Crowley that was big into occult and black magic and all this kind of stuff.
Thelema?
Yeah, that's right. They have the like the goat head in the videos, and Beyonce does it too, and you know all the symbolism. Like Jay-Z is one of the main ones for that, and he cusses Jesus like so much. He had a song called Lucifer. If you play it backwards, it says "Murder, Murder, Jesus." You know, the next song on the album was 99 Problems, which was track number 9. So if you flip that, you know, back when we had CDs, if you flip that over, that's 666. Like, you know, and then the track after that's Lucifer. He's been doing this from day one. You know, even calling his label Rockefeller. If people, you know, if they've looked into the Illuminati stuff and who the Rockefellers are. You know, he's been filling his music and his videos with this kind of stuff for years, you know.
We know the industry definitely has its share of, I guess, you know, tricks that it plays. We're going to, not to get too off topic, we're going to get back, but Jay-Z has been quite a dubious character. I know over the years he's been wearing the sign of, I believe, the Nation of Gods and Earths, which is an offshoot from the Nation of Islam, who believe, you know, the black man is God, and you know, even though he doesn't come out and say that he's representing,
like
5% nation is pretty the same as the Nation of God, and the same, just two different names. But
right.
So I say that to say, you know, he's quite a questionable, interesting character. But when people say that, I want to still tie this in with, I guess Jesus as well, because recently I had a conversation with some of the brothers from the Hebrew Israelites, and they're very firm in their stance of Jesus being a black man and so on and so forth. Do you feel just how we, I guess, take and accept Jesus, do you feel it matters? Some people say it doesn't matter. Do you feel it matters? Do you feel it doesn't matter? Or do you think...
I mean, personally, I know a few people from the Hebrew Israelites, and we've sat and had very peaceful conversations and debates and stuff. Didn't get heated in any way. There was a lot of mutual respect there, which was great.
Good, thanks.
But personally, I don't think that it matters. Like, I think that what he did matters. Like, he died for everybody's sin. He took the punishment for everybody's sin, so that if you accept him, you're pardoned from that sin, basically. Because we can't earn our way to heaven. Like, we can't live a perfect life. If heaven is a perfect place and God's a perfect God, then we can't earn our way there, because we can't be perfect. So he lived the perfect life that we can't live, and he took the punishment that we don't want to take. So that's the trade that he's offering. But in terms of race, what I will say is this. It's very clear, if you look at science as well, you can see that the original people, you know, let's take it back to Adam and Eve, like, they must be black people, because only black people have a gene pool that is diverse enough for other races to come after. So if the first people were white, then everybody would be white. If the first people were Asian, everybody would be Asian. But because they must have been black, that's why we have so much diversity in the world. Based on based on the image that I see on the shroud on his burial cloth. I don't think he looks like a black man, but based on where he lived in the world, he wouldn't have been white. So I think his complexion would have looked more Asian, like he would have had brown skin, dark features, dark hair. Definitely wouldn't be this Caucasian, blonde-haired, blue-eyed Jesus that we sometimes see represented in the media. Definitely not that. Because just based on where he was in the world, like he would be the only person to look like that there if that was the case. But so I don't think that he was either black or white. I think that he would have had brown skin, you know. But again, I don't think it matters. I think that.
Yes.
Yeah, sorry,
no. Okay, I don't want to cut you off. I was just going to interject a point there because the reason I brought it up is because you kind of touched on it in your answer, but some feel as though he came to spread a message to his people, and they say then, okay, well, his people are only a particular group of people. So where would that then leave everybody else? But you believe also that a message and a covenant was sent to the Gentiles also.
That's right, yeah, because he did come to his people initially. Like the plan was to come to the Jews first, and then it would be their job to preach the gospel to the Gentiles. So I would be now. The Bible says that in Christ there's no Jew or Gentile. So I don't consider myself a Gentile anymore, but I would have been. You know, I mean, I was a Gentile before I was in Christ. But there's a passage in the Bible. I think it's one of the disciples, Peter. Right, he sees this a vision of a banner that it like unfolds from the sky, and it's got all the foods that they wasn't allowed to eat. And then God says, like, go eat, basically. And then he's like, but you know, that's against the faith. Like, I wouldn't defile myself. I wouldn't defile the faith by doing that. And then God says, if I call something clean, then it's clean. But that vision, it wasn't about food. It wasn't about go and eat this food. It was a message for him, because shortly after this, he's told to preach to these Gentiles. So it was just an illustration that the time was changing, and that the faith needed to now be spread to the Gentiles too. So God just used an illustration of the food to say, look, we called that unclean, now I'm calling it clean. So now is the time to go preach to them. So it wasn't actually about food, it was just like a metaphor that he gave. And like I say, like, I feel like, you know, why create so much diversity if it's not going to be accepted? You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, it's a point. I made. I was listening to not a debate the other day. It was on one of the channels on YouTube I familiarized with. I don't know if you're familiar with God Logic.
No, I haven't seen that one. I'll check that one out.
Yeah, I mean, he's from the States. He's a good brother. He usually does a lot of debates with Muslims and stuff, but he actually had somewhat of a debate with a brother from the Hebrew Israelite community, and, you know, the Hebrew Israelite brother was telling them he only accepts certain things, and, you know, so on and so forth. It didn't necessarily get heated, but a few conversations later, the Hebrew Israelite brother, he actually came back onto the platform and said he was pretty much sort of no longer with the group, and it sort of felt as though, in his words, that he was going down the wrong path in terms of being taught hate, or a degree of hate in some of the teachings and stuff like that. Now I know everybody kind of looks at things different, and there are some, you know, groups that maybe are a bit more gun-ho than others in different ways and stuff. But my thing has always been like, you know, especially when I look at people that have the acceptance of Jesus, you know, that's kind of like the thing that puts everybody on one accord. You know, I want to see more of that. Like, because when we look at like Muslims and some of these other groups, even though they've got their different sects, they come together under, you know, they all believe in Allah, you know. So I think for people that believe in Jesus, whether that be Yeshua or Yahweh, however, you know, whatever definition they want to use, I think we got to kind of come together in the right way, or find ways where we can come together with what we truly believe in.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I don't want to downplay like the importance of what the actual truth is, but I think that God he's after people's hearts. Like, it's not always down to like kind of always down to what title people call themselves, because you
That's
know,
right.
if you look in the Bible, Jesus said, he said, on the last day, people will come to me and they'll say, you know, didn't I preach in your name and I cast out demons in your name and all this kind of stuff? And I'll say to them, depart from me, I never knew you. So he's if you think about what type of person would be saying to him, I did this in your name, I did that in your name, like that's someone who obviously professed themselves to be a believer. But he's saying to them, I never knew you, because their heart wasn't ever with him. So it doesn't matter what title you give yourself, really and truly. It's just, you know, do you have a heart for God?
And do you know the real, true, and living God? Because that's a great point. Some people say they believe in a Jesus that's a different type of Jesus. Now, I don't really get too much in the stitch about names, because sometimes people, they say, oh, you know, this name didn't exist, this letter didn't exist. And I feel the Muslims do that a lot. You know, this ain't really going to be too much focusing on the Muslims in this conversation, but, you know, their things is very, oh, it has to be this way, it has to be said this way and stuff. And I think...
Yeah, I mean, I'll tell you my take on the whole Islam thing. Like, they obviously, they're called... Jesus Isa, which that's not a problem to me, but they would say that he didn't die on the cross. They say God made it look like he was on the cross, but it was actually someone else. So first of all, that's calling God a liar, right? Because it's saying that God deceived people into thinking that Jesus was on the cross when really he wasn't.
That's right.
So that's calling God a liar from the start. You know, also I would say if you look at how Islam is constructed, they've got some of the Old Testament in there, and then they've got some of what I would call Jesus fan fiction. Like, after Jesus was on the earth, the Gospels was written from like eyewitness testimony. That's what we have in the Bible. But what you find in the Quran is books from like 100, 200, 300 years later, where all those eyewitness accounts have been written already. Now we have something different. Now we've got, you know how like people that are really into, like, say Star Trek, for example, they'll write their own Star Trek story and put it on the internet, and it's fan fiction. Like, that's basically what was going on. They wanted more. They had the Gospels. They wanted more. So they started to write their own little stories of Jesus, about him being 20 feet tall, and he threw his friend off a building and then he raised him back to life. And when he was a baby, he started walking around. And all these like stories that have no weight to them, some of them have ended up in the Quran. And then you have Muhammad that came about 500-600 years later and basically said, oh yeah, you know, even though all these historians have documented that Jesus died on the cross, he didn't really die on the cross. But he comes along and changes the story. And I'm sorry if this offends anyone, but this is the truth, and I'm like, this is the way that I perceive it, you know what I mean? And this is the way that I'm going to tell it. So yeah, like, if the Jesus that you believe in didn't die for everybody's sins and didn't rise again, then he's not the real Jesus. Like, that's the way I see it.
Oh yeah, no, I completely agree. I mean, like I was saying when I was mentioning like the Hebrew Israelites and even the Jewish sects, Messianic Jews, and certain people who make that claim towards following Jesus, I can sort of, for the most part, accept it's the same figure. But when it comes to Islam, I do look at it like the Isa of Islam is not the Jesus of the Bible. It's a completely different person. It's which kind of to me comes off not like Antichrist, because if you go against sort of Christ's teachings and you sort of spreading a new teaching on Christ and the gospel, I sort of see that as an antichrist thing. And you know, some people may not agree with that, but I do feel as though a huge portion of Islam couldn't really hold up without it kind of piggybacking off the back of, and it's sort of a weird one, because a lot of the times they say, oh well, you know, the Bible's been corrupted. They say we have the true book, and it can only be substantiated by other religious groups or faiths that came before it. So it's like,
you know what, right? They discovered something called the Dead Sea Scrolls, which is like the scriptures from the time of Jesus.
Yep.
And what they concluded from that is they are the same today as they was then. You know what I mean? Like, they haven't changed.
Just like Jesus was the same yesterday, today, and tomorrow.
That's right. That's right. That's right. And I feel like what you said about the Antichrist thing, I have to agree with that, because the Bible tells us that someone is going to come before Jesus returns. Someone's going to come and they're going to claim to be God, but that person is going to be the Antichrist. So if and the Muslims believe that when Jesus comes back, when Isa comes back, he's basically coming to wipe out everybody that doesn't believe, which is not, not the way that I would word it. But if you can, if you can count to two, then you shouldn't get confused about who the Antichrist is, because if he's the first one that claims to be him on a big scale and like everybody's accepting that, then you know that it's not him, because he's coming after that. So if you count to two, you shouldn't have a problem.
Yeah, no, they can spin that story. I know the Muslim apologists, they say that Muhammad was the seal of prophets and the greatest example to living man, which to me is a very big fallacy, because...
Oh, yeah, definitely. And I don't mean to offend any Muslims here, but like Muhammad, like there's a lot of questionable things that he did. Like he married a child.
Oh, he killed people. He did a lot of stuff.
He killed people. He teaching his followers to kill people, kill the non-believers, this kind of stuff. Like, they call it the religion of peace, and there's a lot of peaceful Muslims out there, and I've met lots of peaceful Muslims. So I'm not bashing the average Muslim, and I think there's some Muslims that are so they follow their book so well, and they conduct themselves in a peaceful manner, and that's great. But if you look at the book as a whole, you can't deny the fact that it does tell you to kill non-believers. It does tell you to behead them. You know what I mean? It does say that it's like the highest honor, and you'll have like these virgins waiting for you in heaven if you do so. It does say that, and it does say that Muhammad married a child and all of these things. So it's
I debated a Muslim about that the other day, so they can't deny that. And it's interesting. He tried to justify it using historical tropes about what the Romans did and the Greeks.
Yeah, but it's not about comparison.
I said that has nothing.
We can all compare ourselves to someone. We could say, "Oh, okay, well, I steal, but at least I don't kill," or "I kill, but at least I don't rape." Like, if you want to compare yourself to someone, compare yourself to Jesus, and then you will know that we all fall short. That's
right. Because
it's not about no one else.
As you said, when we look at Jesus and just as an example, whether people choose to believe or not, or want to be ignorant or anything, the examples of even what we've been told and what we've been shown is stand up. It's not stuff that anybody could really say is of bad character. So it's like, to me, that's a great example to aspire towards, or even to want to be like, as opposed to somebody saying, "Oh, wow, this other person is of, the utmost exemplary character," and then you look at their character and it doesn't really meet what they're saying. I was going to ask, still slightly around here, are you familiar with any of the Gnostic teachings?
Yeah, so the Gnostic teachings, like, it's funny, like, you actually see a lot of those themes in, like, Hollywood movies these days. Like, they kind of, if you read in between the lines and you really see what they're trying to show you, like, they're trying to paint, like, the devil as, like, the savior and God as the villain in a lot of these things. But, yeah, I've looked in. It's funny because before I actually accepted Jesus and before I accepted the Bible as truth, I was so convinced that the truth couldn't be in the Bible that I was looking into all these Gnostic Gospels and looking into the books that never made it into the Bible, because I felt like that's where I would find the truth. Because I guess it's the spiritual war aspect of it. Like, the enemy will blind your eyes. So I'm looking everywhere for the truth except the Bible. You know what I mean? At that point, because that's the only thing the enemy needs to distract you from. That's why Jesus is the only one that's mocked in the media, But yeah, sorry, what was you going to say about that? I didn't mean to go on their tangent about that.
Yeah, no. That's it's cool. Just kind of looking at it, I suppose, because some do say some of those stories that are in the Quran were also taken from old Gnostic teachings.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, they were. But the thing about that is, right, if you look at those stories, they're not, like, if you look at the Bible and it names actual historical people, right? If you look at those people, they existed at the same time in the same place. If it says that this person traveled to this place on a camel and it took them 3 days, people have tested these things, and it's geographically accurate, it's historically accurate. the Bible there's a scientist in Canada, called Hugh Ross, right? He counted over 200 scientific facts in the Bible that was written like 3,500 years before we discovered them, but they're in the Bible. But when you look at these Gnostic Gospels, it would be the equivalent, some of the facts, so-called facts that you see in there, it would be the equivalent of someone writing a book today that says that I went and had dinner with William Shakespeare. Like, people of this day are going to know that that didn't happen because Shakespeare's dead. But in 1,000 years, people might be confused about that. Like, they might not have the information that we have today. Like, it could get lost. And then they could look at that and say, oh, yeah, so Capes and Shakespeare sat down and had lunch. No, we didn't. But you might not know that in 1,000 years from now. And that's what we see in these Gnostic Gospels. You know, if they say someone traveled from here to there, it doesn't make sense in terms of the time that it would take. The two people that are said to be walking together didn't exist in the same time or the same place. So there's so many things that unravel, and that's how one of the reasons that we know we can trust the books that are in the Bible, because you don't have those discrepancies in there, and also the prophecies that are coming true that are spoken about.
Yeah, no, right on. And you've got a lot of people now who just they want to follow the word and the way. There's a lot of confusion and stuff out there, especially with the internet. It can be a blessing and a curse, because at one point, a lot of this information wasn't as readily available for everybody. So, you think going back, certain books may have been hidden and certain books weren't as accessible. But, a lot of this stuff now you can find at the click of a button.
Yeah, it's all accessible. But, we're entering a different time again now, where we have like the AI technology, where it would be very easy to fake a video that looks like a well-known person and sounds like a well-known person, and is saying certain things, but it may not be legitimate, because we've reached that point with technology now that there's even more deception that could be at everyone's fingertips.
Right, that deep fake stuff. I mean, with that being said, just kind of to bring things back round a little bit, is that why you no longer really, I guess, are involved that much with the entertainment industry as such? I know a lot of people, including myself, have seen a lot of the deceptive and false aspects of it, and some people are quite tired of it. They feel, there's bigger things happening in the world. Is that one of the reasons you don't necessarily push the music and stuff as much?
It is. I mean, before I had the faith that I have now, I was very, very serious about the music. I did some work with One Extra. I was, briefly interviewed by Charlie Sloth, and I was performing at the O2 Academy. I worked with Mo Preem Shakur. I was getting about, and I was doing my thing, and I was really trying to push it. And then when I became a Christian, that kind of ambition, it was sort of stripped away from me, and then all I was left with was a desire to just kind of preach the truth. But I did start to become more aware of what the industry is like, and what it stands for. You know what I mean? And that's not really something that I want to be a part of. So I'm happy to be more of a grassroots kind of artist that is trying to affect the local community, rather than make millions from it, because I know that in order to be that kind of artist, to be that platinum artist that's making millions, there's a lot of sacrifices you'll need to make. There's a lot of agendas you'll need to bow down to, and there's a lot of things that you have to be willing to push. And I'm just not down to do any of that. Not saying that I was in that position, like, I wasn't in some make or break position, but
you're not deluded to some of those aspects of the industry where some people may be,
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
That you have to compromise for some things in some cases, and in some points go against your own integrity. Now, some people may not have, the same level of integrity or morals or ethics, so for them it might be different and might not be so much of a quandary. But I think, as you said, when you're under Christ, or when you have a certain understanding or understanding, you're going to look at things a bit differently.
Yeah. And, to take you right back to the beginning, like, that's why I'm glad that, like, I grew up with like Tupac as my main influence, because it made me view hip-hop music differently. Like I viewed it more as a tool to reach people than, imagine if like my favorite rapper was Jay-Z, then maybe I would have just been like fully all about that, like consumerism and, you know what I mean, and getting as much money as possible. And I don't think there's anything wrong with getting money, like, don't get me wrong, but I'm just not willing to compromise who I am to do that.
Yeah, I mean, some of those guys like Jay-Z, they came later, whether many feel if Tupac hadn't met his demise when he did, some of these other guys in the rap game may not necessarily have been as big or reached certain heights. I mean, I guess that's kind of debatable. But one of the points slightly on that is because I like how when you mention Tupac, you say he was a huge influence. You don't say he was an idol. And, we denounce idols and stuff anyway, but I think that's one thing that's dangerous, especially within the industry and just not just music. A lot of people are, they're magnified onto these positions, and some of them, I did another podcast on this before, they actually want to be idolized by people and stuff, and they want to be heralded as something bigger than everybody else. But I just want to, slightly touch on that, just looking at the industry. Do you feel or do you see it as well? I'm guessing the answer is yes, but I don't want to speak for you, that people idolize these celebrities way too much, and there's a huge culture of just idolatry within the industry.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. And you're right in saying that certain artists, they want that. So going back to Jay-Z, not just to focus on him, because there's so many artists that do the same thing, but what purpose could you have by calling yourself Jehovah, which means Jehovah, which is the name of God? Like, why do you want millions of people to call you the name of God? You know what I'm saying? Like, what is the purpose of that? And Kanye was on that kind of stuff before he broke away from the industry, calling himself Jesus. He even tried to like publish a version of the Bible where every time it says God, he was replaced with his name. You know what I mean? Like, these are just not like normal things. Like,
that kind of stuff is blasphemous. Yeah, that kind of stuff blasphemous. I was going to say, what would you then say to those who say about the scripture where it written in the law that ye are gods? Now, I'm not calling those guys gods, but yeah, what would you say to that?
I would say that it means that we are different to the animals in the sense that God has created us in a different way. He's created us to be creators and creatives. We are not gods in the sense that, people think you can manifest anything you want. I'm sure you can have access to things if it's in God's will, but I think he was just referring to the fact that God's spirit is in us. Like, it's God's breath of life that makes us living things. Whereas I think we are the only thing in creation that can be conscious of its creator and ask questions like, who am I? Why am I here? Who created me? We are the only ones that really ponder that. Like, the animal kingdom doesn't ponder on that. Plants definitely don't ponder on that. So it was just letting us know that we are a lower form of godliness and not a higher form of animal. So people would say that we evolved from apes or whatever they say, or we've got the same common ancestor. I don't believe that. I believe that we have a common designer. But there's actually, this brings us on to something else. But if you look into the fossil record, for example, there's no physical evidence of that type of evolution. There's only adaptation. Like, one species will change over a long period of time, but it's never become another species. I tell my kids this stuff. I tell them that, like, the real form of evolution is closer to Pokemon than it is to, like, anything else. Like, how in Pokemon, like, I don't know all the names, but, like, the one thing becomes the next thing, but they're pretty much the same. Like, that's basically what is really going on. Like, you don't have a fish becoming an ape, becoming a man. I think this is just part of the delusion, like part of this. It's just to point you away from the truth, really. So, that was a tangent, but basically, like we're like a lower form of godliness than more so that than a higher form of animal.
Yeah, I think it was Manly P. Hall that may have said, man is not an animal standing on his hind legs, but he also said, we have a job to do, a responsibility, just like the God above us, we have a responsibility to what's beneath us. And I guess that tie in with the scriptures that say man was given authority and dominion over the lesser beings on the planet. But that's also with responsibility. That's not to, be destructive and
Yeah, that's
but
right.
we
That's
have the
right.
ability, they say, to go out in the world, and whoever has the desire to improve things is playing
Yeah,
God, and whoever has the desire to destroy things is ultimately playing devil.
yeah, that's right. And it's like what I said about the whole creative thing. It's like, and it goes back to the whole like thing that people think they can manifest anything. Like God can create things from His word, like out of nothing. He can speak it into existence, but we require something. We can make something out of something else. You know what I mean? Like we can take the components that are already here and make something new. But we're not on God's level where we can just speak things like into existence. Like, and I know that the Bible says life and death is of the tongue, but I think that's more about, are you being negative about things? Are you being positive about things? And there's a lot that can be said for that. Like that, it's great to be positive, because if your outlook is positive, your actions are going to be positive. But I don't think you can just sit here and just like, like before I did this journey, I said I was really into like the new age stuff, and I would walk around with like a fake check in my wallet, thinking that somehow that's going to send out energy that's going to bring money to me. Like, nah, if you want money, then go and earn money, or think outside the box to make money. But we're not like mini gods, basically. I don't believe that.
Okay. I mean, I think, a lot of times it depends on how people define things. Ultimately, we're looking at terminology and definitions. Some take the Greek aspect of the word God, power. Some take it as generator, operator, destroyer. Some take it as, little g God being different to big G God. So I guess there's so many different ways of understanding the outlook. But, my thing is, that's why we have these conversations, is to, explore our minds and explore just the outlooks of how we look at these things. And ultimately, I think, as long as people aren't claiming to be the supreme being, most high, God, which I don't, I think that's where it becomes problematic, where people start making those claims. I don't necessarily get too much in a stitch about some people's utilization of it if I understand why they're using it that way. It may not necessarily mean I agree. I build with some brothers from the 5% Nation as well, for instance, and so on and so forth. They say peace, God.
So I mean, I know a lot of their theology is like the black man is God, the white man is the devil, like that kind of stuff.
They do put some of that in there. I mean, that's come from their Nation of Islam teachings, which some people find quite ironic, because the progenitor of the Nation of Islam, Fard Muhammad, was, he pretty much looked like a white man, or he's a white Arab.
Well, the Muhammad in the Quran is a white man, because
Muhammad is a white man.
Yeah, there's like several like scriptures that talk about the whiteness of his leg and the whiteness of his stomach, and it just makes that point. I guess because it would have been rare for that part of the world.
It's quite interesting, because not to beat up on Muslims, but a lot of the time Muslims, they try to beat up on black people who were involved with Christianity, and they say, you follow a white man's religion.
Yeah. You know what? Actually, I'm glad you said that. That's something I didn't touch on, because I'm a white guy, but my wife is black. My children are mixed. So when I was looking into the Bible, I did have this idea it was used in slavery. It's the white man's religion, and this, that, and the other. And I thought it was full of contradictions. So it wasn't just a case of I believe in Jesus, so I accept the Bible. I actually went on a separate journey to work out, is the Bible a trustworthy source of information and whatever. But that was one of the things that I looked into. So what I will say on that is, 1,000 years before slavery happened, there was a lot of Christians in different African countries. So there were black Christians before slavery, and one of the oldest churches in the world is in Ethiopia, and things like that. And what the Bible that was used during slavery, it was an altered version. So everything that speaks about freedom and liberation and Moses freeing his people from Pharaoh and all that stuff, that was all taken out. The only things that was left in was things that you could, when it's taken out of context, you can manipulate it and make it mean something else. So they was given like this like altered version of the Bible that was only like 400 pages. So that was interesting to find out, because with my children being mixed race, like I didn't want to introduce them to something that is in some way, prejudice in some form, you know what I mean? But so that was one of the things that I looked into. Like another thing that I looked into was all the contradictions that I thought was in there. So like me and my logic, I'm looking at it and I'm thinking, well, on one page it says turn the other cheek, and on another page it says an eye for an eye. So how can they both be true? But again, it's about context, because an eye for an eye is actually about the justice system, and it's saying you should give a punishment that fits the crime. So if a starving child steals a loaf of bread, you shouldn't go cutting their hand off for that. You know what I mean? Because that's not an eye for an eye. That's not just. But turn the other cheek is more about your everyday walk, your everyday life. If someone insults you, you don't have to rise to that. That's what it's telling you. So it's all about context. You know what I mean? So that's something that I realized looking into this stuff as well.
Yeah, no, it's a great point. Context definitely important, just how we look at things. And I do think people get in a stitch a lot of times and, can get into arguments backwards and forwards about how they interpret things or how things are contextualized. But I definitely try and steer away from that where I can and just focus on, the information and stuff. But
I used to take debate on that every time. I used to get into so many debates and stuff. But now, I definitely steer away from that as well.
Do you know what I always say, bro? Do you know what I always say, brother? I always say, I don't mind speaking to people and having conversations and, sharing discourse, learning. And I can be wrong, but I always say one thing about the truth, though. The truth, just like we say, like Jesus is always going to be what it is. The truth doesn't even really need no one to defend it, because it always is going to be the truth. Don't get me wrong. There's some occasions where we have to step up and speak the truth and stand in truth. But ultimately, in terms of like arguing with naysayers and scoffers and stuff, and especially those who are hardwired to be so polarizing towards it, oftentimes you kind of could just be wasting your time, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I heard a guy called Myron Golden make this point. He said that basically the truth doesn't need to silence the lie, but the lie will always need to silence the truth. Like the lie can't exist with the truth there, but the truth doesn't really need defending, because it's always going to be what it is. And that's and I think when someone is threatening your freedom of speech, like that's when your alarm bell should go off, like that they're projecting a lie, because I can believe what I believe on my own. I don't need the world to believe it too. So if you can't believe what you believe without forcing it on everybody else, who are you really trying to convince? So
right on. Now, before we wind down, that just bring me to a point, because some people feel as though Christianity was forced onto people by the Crusades and stuff, even though that may be more attributed to Catholicism. And then when you look into research, some say it was more an adverse thing to the Islamic terror that was happening then at that time. So I guess, it's when people are always going to have something to say and say, this is forced or that is forced. That's why I kind of take the approach of being, dare I say, non-religious, but following the scriptures and stuff to the best of my abilities.
I feel that. And like, I think the thing that people often do is they confuse the church with God. Because the church, yes, is supposed to represent God, but the church is not God. So when the church makes mistakes, or if the church has this blood trail through history or whatever, or you look at Catholicism and you look at the abuse that's taken place,
and it's not the whole church. It's only it's not the whole.
Like, that don't represent God. But I currently don't attend a church. I don't need to be in a church for me to have my faith. I'm not saying that people shouldn't attend a church. I would say if you do attend a church, make sure that it actually stands for what God stands for. But everybody can look at the mistakes of man and pin them on God, but You know, he already did that himself. Like he paid the price of everybody's sin himself. You know what I mean? So so we don't need to try and pin everyone's stuff on him anymore. You know, but yeah, basically people make that mistake all the time in terms of, oh, the church did this and that must mean that your God is that. Well, no, that just means that people are faulty and they fail, and you know, that's why we need a savior.
That's right. You know, while we're coming up to the hour mark, we definitely appreciate your time and some of the stuff that you shared with us, and we definitely want to have you back on and share some more discourse. I just want to ask before we start winding down, I know you just said you don't attend the church and stuff, and, you know, I'm the same. A lot of us know and feel like our bodies are church and stuff, but you know, in terms of where you're at and stuff now going forward, we've mentioned, you know, a bit of your music and stuff that you've done in the past. Could we potentially hear some stuff in the future? Maybe not push it for a mainstream, but something still maybe that pushes the word, but maybe not like completely the way of gospel, but, you know, something that can reach potentially some young people. Because I feel as though music and the arts is a great thing to connect with people, especially the younger generation. But sometimes you can't be too preachy within it or too forceful.
Yeah.
But putting the right sort of jewels out there.
I'm not like 100% focused on music, but I will have a few things coming out in the not too distant future. I really just treat music as a hobby these days, so there will be more music from me. I have kind of steered away from the super evangelistic approach that, you know, I've had with a couple of projects. Because I feel like they was the season I was in, and I'm still 100% in my faith. Like that, I would never leave my faith. Like it's just, once you know the truth, it's like if you know 2 + 2 = 4, like you can't unlearn that. It doesn't matter if the whole world says it's 5. Like you're going to know it's 4. So I'm always going to know the truth, and I'm always going to stand on that. But in terms of the music that I release, it probably will be a little bit more in terms of bridging the gap from where I was before to where I've been since. You know how, like, I compare it to like an artist like Lauryn Hill, for example. You know, Lauryn Hill, she's got one of the most classic albums ever, you know, with The Miseducation.
Mm-hmm.
So many people from different backgrounds, you know, love that album. But she, you know, if you really listen, she does speak about her faith in that. So I think that because I am a Christian man, it is going to spill over into the music now and again. But it's not going to be the primary focus of it. Like it has been for a few projects. It's more just expression, you know. So you'll hear those little seeds in there, but it's not like you have to be a Christian to appreciate it, you know.
Yeah, okay, that sounds good. And just before we wind down, is there anything you would recommend for our listeners or just anybody out there to check out? I know you aforementioned some of the resources that helped you along your journey. Is there anything that you'd recommend anybody to check out, maybe by way of books, documentaries, so on and so forth?
So yeah, like if anything that I've said has sparked any interest, whether it be related to the New Age or the Jesus myth theory or whatever, I would just encourage people to just look into both sides of every debate, and then you can make an informed decision. If you can check out on YouTube the music video that I mentioned that I have called Shroud of Turin, it's by Capes A Witness. Check that out. If you do find it an interesting topic, then in the description box there's a few documentaries in there from the BBC and Discovery Channel and maybe a few more. But yeah, definitely check that topic out. And yeah, I would just say, just as a general rule in life, just you don't have to take things on face value. Like just because someone says something is true, even me, like this is why I like to give people the tools to look into things for themselves. You know, so just like have a open-minded look at things and see. I believe that anyone who's searching for the truth will ultimately come to Jesus because he is the truth. Some people are more on a happiness quest than a truth quest. There's a quote from a guy called Frank Turek, but I think is very true. You know, some people just want whatever's going to satisfy them in that moment. Some people actually want the truth. So if you're seeking the truth, then that's where I believe you'll end up.
Oh, sounds good. And we do know Jesus definitely the way, the truth, and the life. We do encourage people to check out as much information as you can. You said a great thing. don't just follow us and take our word from it. Use your own mind. We encourage people to have an open mind, open your heart, and open your mind. This isn't something like some groups or some religions or anything like that. It's just telling you must believe this, or you must do this, or you have to. You know, we encourage people to open their minds and their hearts, man.
Preach, bro. That's it. That's real.
And that's the best way. So I don't know if you got any. Do you have any social media you want anybody to check out, or are you moving in silence a bit at the minute? Or
yeah, I'm just Cape Say Witness on everything, YouTube, Instagram. I don't really use Twitter too much. There's an account, but
yeah, you want to spell it out. We'll put the text up on there, but that's Capes with a K.
Yeah, Capes with a K, A Witness. You'll find me on IG, TikTok, YouTube. That's probably about it, really.
No doubt, man. So, my brother, I appreciate you spending some time with us. We'll definitely get you back on soon for some more conversation. I
appreciate that.
You know how we do about online.com. This is the Dream Builders division where we break down and look at stuff involving religion. So we definitely appreciate anybody who taps in, listens to the end. If you got any questions, do send over an email. Send it over to the email contact@thatonline.com. And if you want to join us for any conversational show, just let us know in the comments. Your boy Fonzie Neutron out on this one. Peace and shalom.